Welcome back to this special discussion called Kotak versus RBI. As we know, the Bombay High Court has not stayed the Reserve Bank's deadline for Kotak Mahindra Bank to bring down the promoter stake to 20% from 30%. So come Jan 1st, Kotak Mahindra Bank is in violation of the Reserve Bank's rules of shareholding, and it is in danger of facing penalty. We've discussed what options it has, and there doesn't seem to be too many, except perhaps negotiating with the central bank, a difficult thing to do when you have just taken them to court. But let's now look at the rules themselves. Janmejaya Sinha, your thoughts. Up until through the 2000s, the Reserve Bank only spoke of fit and proper qualifications for promoters. It did not give them a shareholding limit. And even now there's confusion. Voting rights for widely held institutions who own shares goes all the way to 26%, and such entities can hold up to 40%. Like, for instance, a Fairfax, or for instance, maybe if it comes to it, a Berkshire. They can hold up to 40%, but the promoter himself can hold only 15%. In any case, voting rights are available up to 26%. There are too many numbers over here without adequate justification. Would you say we need to rethink rules of private sector ownership?
So actually, I think this is a very important question and a very important discussion. Let's divide this into three separate buckets. First, what is normatively good? And I think Sandeep was making a very important point. The global financial crisis happened with very widely dispersed holdings for very large banks, you know. And actually what happened in those situations were that the managements had no control, and actually they were privatizing the profits and socializing the losses, as you can see what happened ultimately. The second issue is, are the guidelines that are in place clear, fair, and the same for everyone? You know, and I think in the Indian banking sector requires a level playing field. That includes public sector banks, old private sector banks, new private sector banks. What are the guidelines? Can we actually articulate them simply, sharply, and clearly? And then the third issue is, how does Mr. Kotak now deal with the fact that the High Court has not given the bank a stay order? On that we've already discussed. So now if we take the other 2 points, I think, you know, and since 2013, I am in agreement with what Sandeep says, that, you know, this widely dispersed shareholding, is it a good or is it a bad? And how do we know this? The world is actually undergoing dramatic changes nowadays. The Anglo-Saxon and the Washington consensus is under challenge, okay? And it's under challenge, and we need to appreciate what is the best structure for us. You know, widely dispersed, you know, if you look at HDFC Bank or ICICI Bank, they are largely foreign banks right now, you know, with dispersed holdings which are held by foreigners, right?
Yes.
So we really need to actually answer this question quite seriously. And I think there should be an expert committee that is set up, which actually goes into this matter with some depth.
Yes.
Actually, and look at it very clearly to say what is a normative good? What do we want to have?
Okay.
And then the second thing is clearing the past. It's always difficult because there are so many rules that have been put in place, and they are applying disparately. And so those have to be made standard.
Let me ask Mr. Gandhi, because he has been through most of that period. Mr. Gandhi, you would know that Y.V. Reddy made a speech recently pointing out that the way in which banks are held in India, the public sector banks are held largely by government and LIC with very little Indian shareholding, and the private sector banks, especially the very good retail ones, are held largely by foreigners, again with very little Indian shareholding. So before I come to Mr. Gandhi, you know, what's your sense about this, Sandeep? Do you think the rules need to be rewritten? You saw the proxy voting, proxy voters and foreign investors in the HDFC case questioning Deepak Parekh and a whole host of other directors. Now, you may find a lot of promoters in danger because foreign shareholders will be led by their proxy advisory firms. Should we allow promoters more skin in the game?
I think so. And, you know, I think Janmejaya also made some other significant points with respect to having a level playing field for everybody, really. I don't think you can make rules as you go. So I think there has to be one philosophy, one vision. Everybody kind of sticks to that vision. But of course, I think thinking more deeply about that vision is also important, because you can't just say that having promoters is bad or having fragmented shareholding is bad. I mean, there are pros and cons to each. And, there are different models which have various benefits. So I think it has to be thought of with a little more rigor and then applied equally, fairly and uniformly.
Yeah. If the promoter is, say, Ramesh Gelli, then you don't want a promoter to hold 40%. You want them to be widely held. But if a promoter is like Uday Kotak, who has done a very good job of his bank, you would feel, why not allow more skin in the game? So obviously you can't have different rules. Right? That's the point you're making.
Yeah, but I mean, again, it can't be based on whether it's Mr. Gelli or not. It's basically.
No, my point is, why not?
It should fall foul of fit and proper rules, that you should person should not have a single vote then.
Exactly. My point. That is the point I was going to ask Mr. Gandhi as well. Mr. Gandhi, in the 2000s, that used to be the Reserve Bank stand. If you are fit and proper, then percentages don't come in the way. They would allow promoters to hold a larger stake and extend guidelines if needed, or even the guidelines did not even mention any such numbers. But somewhere in the 2013 to 16 period, we started putting percentages, probably because licenses were going on tap. That may have been the reason. But do you think we need to rethink? If you're fit and proper, 40% is fine, 35 is fine. But if you're not fit and proper, even 20 or 10 is too much. Should we start thinking on those lines?
See, but the regulations have been framed in this way. That is, to begin with, fit and proper promoters are allowed even up to 40 or even past 40 for a period. The period has been defined as 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, or whatever it is. So after that period, continued large holding by individual promoter or promoter group, that is what has been considered as not a desirable item. That is why there has been prescriptions that after a period you should be bringing down your holding. That's the stance Reserve Bank has taken in these years. So it is not that the Reserve Bank was against somebody holding larger stake. That has been permitted, including, as I said, even beyond 40 also. Even a recent case which you quoted also, it has been allowed more than 40. The point is how long they can hold that large position. That is what is under discussion, or that is what is being disputed. Reserve Bank has taken a stance that given a long period of 10 to 15 years or whatever, that is sufficient. By the time they should be broadly, widely held. So that's the position it has taken. There, I don't think we cannot be talking it is fair, unfair, because that has been transparently, it has been prescribed for all.
Yeah. Now, I take a point just very quickly, since I don't have any time for further threshing out this issue. Do you think, Mr. Sinha, that the dice is getting loaded in favor of big institutions owning 40%, which means a Fairfax, a Berkshire, or these large institutions can hold 40%, but individual Indians, say Uday Kotak or a Rasesh Shah, will never be able to hold a large stake? Do you think we have to rethink the rules? Has the time come?
So I actually think that it's a very good time. Periodically, every 10 years, these rules should always be reviewed. And they should be reviewed by an expert committee in the light of the developments that have taken place across the world. And then the moment we have an agreement on that normative vision, we should then try and ensure that there is a level playing field which applies equally to all.
Okay.
I really feel that that's a really important thing, and we really need to do that.
Let me squeeze one quick word. Mr. Sinha, what would you do if you're Uday Kotak today?
I would first go and talk to RBI. I would also talk to investors. I would also figure out, what the penalties are likely to be, and then decide which way to go ahead. I mean, look, I don't believe he wanted to go to court. That I don't believe.
Oh, right. Well, anyway, that really is the micro issue. The bank, Kotak Mahindra Bank, has to negotiate with the regulator and with its shareholders. It's in a sticky spot, you will have to say. But on a larger plane, we really need to perhaps once again look at the rules governing promoters of private sector banks and how much shareholding they should be permitted? Should it be a quantitative assessment at all, quantitative level at all, or should it be simply qualitative? If you are fit and proper, these percentages should not apply. That debate perhaps can be raised once again. Janmejaya Sinha, Mr. Gandhi and Sandeep Parekh, thank you very much for this conversation. I'm sure we are going to have many more such debates on this issue in the days to come.